Greetings from Pennsylvania, the second of the original 13 colonies. It joined the Union on December 12, 1787. With a population of 12.4 million, it is America's sixth most populous state. Pennsylvania is known as the Keystone State for the role it played in the founding of this nation.
It had the largest city, Philadelphia, which at the time was the capital, and it was really the hinge state that kept the colonies together.
Pennsylvania is also known as the Quaker State, a tribute to founder William Penn's religious beliefs. In fact, the state's name is Latin for Penn's Woods. In Pennsylvania, there's absolutely no shortage of history. During the colonial era, Philadelphia was America's largest and most sophisticated city. Its central location made it the crossroads of the Revolution. Here in Independence Hall, the Founding Fathers gathered to create the cornerstone documents of our democracy: the Declaration of Independence, the Articles of Confederation, and the U.S. Constitution. For all that Pennsylvania has given to the nation, it's made one other major contribution to the American experience that should never, ever be overlooked: ketchup.
Heinz 57 ketchup.
Heinz ketchup is the only ketchup I've ever known.
The ubiquitous red sauce that we know and love today was created in Pittsburgh in 1876 by Henry John Heinz.
He always said, the way to success is to do a common thing uncommonly well. Well, nobody made ketchup better than H.J. Heinz.
Moving from condiments to candy brings us to Hershey, Pennsylvania, known as Chocolatetown, USA. Milton Hershey started off making caramels in 1886, but after building his own milk processing plant, Milton became the first American to develop a formula for manufacturing milk chocolate. The rest is confectionery history. If you're from Pennsylvania, the odds are good that German blood flows through your veins. About 25% of Pennsylvania ancestry is German. In fact, the term Pennsylvania Dutch doesn't refer to Dutch people at all. It's actually a corruption of Pennsylvania Deutsch, meaning German. Today, the expression is often applied to the Amish, who trace their roots to reform-minded Mennonites in 17th century Europe. When persecution drove them to America in the 1720s, many chose to settle in Pennsylvania, attracted by William Penn's founding principles of religious tolerance.
The Amish were dissenters from the dominant religious powers in Europe, and they came to the United States with a very kind of pure agrarian philosophy and have remained relatively uncontaminated by the modern world.
The town of Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania has tapped into its own immigrant origins with a celebration that dates from 1886, February 2nd, 1886 to be exact. We know it as Groundhog Day. In Europe, they call it Candlemas Day.
The legend was that if the sun shone brightly on Candlemas Day, there would be 6 more weeks of winter. If it didn't, the weather would turn and we'd have an early spring.
The folks in Punxsutawney have maintained the tradition for over 120 years.
His Majesty, King Philip!
February 1st, you go up to Punxsutawney and party all night until dawn. Unfortunately, there's so many cameras around, he always sees his shadow. So we always have 6 more weeks of winter.
6 more weeks of mild winter weather there will be.
Half of Pennsylvania's population lives in the state's 2 major metropolitan areas, Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh is the heart and soul of western Pennsylvania, a city built at the confluence of 3 mighty rivers, the Allegheny, the Ohio, and the Monongahela. Down through the ages, these rivers carved wide gaps through the hills and mountains of the state, creating natural passageways for river, road, and rail cargo.
Big cities like Pittsburgh grew up, and little coal patch communities grew up around them. We call them coal patches because these little towns evolved in valleys where there was coal or other mining operations going on.
During 200 years of coal mining, Pennsylvania produced more than 25% of the nation's total coal output. It presently ranks 4th in the nation in annual production by state. Coal has brought prosperity to much of Pennsylvania, but it has also brought environmental degradation, nowhere more so than in the town of Centralia. Centralia has been on fire, literally, for more than 40 years.
It became very convenient for the people in Centralia to start throwing their garbage and trash in one of these stripping pits. One day the garbage and trash had caught on fire, igniting the vein of coal at the bottom of the pit.
Every attempt to extinguish the fire met with failure. It just kept burning and burning. Residents resigned themselves to living with it. But by the mid-1980s, the giant plumes of smoke and deadly gases made coexistence impossible.
These families started getting very sick, nauseous, extraordinary drowsiness, the classic symptoms of carbon monoxide.
Nevertheless, Centralia remained a local story and a local problem until Valentine's Day 1981, when a patch of ground collapsed beneath the feet of a 12-year-old boy named Todd Domboski.
All of a sudden, he drops into the ground, up to his knees, and then to his waist, and then he's out of sight, underground. And there was a huge plume of steam that came out of the ground, after that happened. And he's holding onto a tree root and yelling for help. Unfortunately, his 14-year-old cousin, Eric, was nearby, and he grabs Todd's arm and just yanks him, out of this hole, and saves his life.
The national press swooped in, and Centralia became big news.
Our population back in the 70s and the 80s was approximately 1,100 people. Right now, our current population is 18 residents living in 9 occupied buildings. It's been difficult watching everything slowly being erased from town.
The Centralia fire continues to rage and has now spread over 400 acres. It's estimated that there's enough coal to feed the flames for another 250 years. Coal has played a more positive role in making Pennsylvania a major center for steel production.
Pennsylvania is a great place to make steel because the stars all align here for steel makers. The right kind of coal is here, which can be baked and turned into coke. The raw material, iron, is here. And the rivers are here that transport barges full of raw material and then could take the finished product to market. Andrew Carnegie was one of the first of the great steel makers in America. A young Scotsman, he figured out how to vertically integrate steel mills. That means everything that you needed to make steel came together, from the raw materials to the factories or mills to the transportation network needed to take that product to market. He figured it out early on and became the richest man in the world.
The growing industry was fueled by the armament demands of World War I. Then the development of automobile manufacturing created an expanding new market. During World War II, Pennsylvania was heralded as the arsenal of America. In that era, the state accounted for fully 1/3 of the national steel output. Tanks, planes, ships, and shells poured out of the local factories. By the late 1960s, the fortunes of the U.S. steel industry began to fade. A victim of economic recession, labor troubles, overseas competition, and an unwillingness to modernize aging facilities. As costs went up, prices went down. Mills closed and jobs disappeared. The region surrounding Pittsburgh became known as the Rust Belt.
The old dirty industry of steel making has gone largely overseas.
Before long, clever entrepreneurs found a new use for the old mines that industry had abandoned.
One of the major products is mushrooms, which, because we have large limestone mines, which were used for steel, we have these big, huge underground mines that are perfect for growing mushrooms.
From mined mushrooms to founding fathers to Penn's Woods, Pennsylvania is truly a keystone that holds America together.
Look here, I'm talking about America. America.